Day 4 of the murder trial of former Missouri State instructor Edward Gutting has wrapped up. Gutting is accused of stabbing former co-worker Mark Cooper to death in 2016. Gutting doesn't deny that he killed Cooper, but he's pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. This morning, the defense called two psychiatrists who treated Gutting in 2011, 5 years before Cooper was killed. One said he diagnosed Gutting with anxiety disorder and OCD. The other believed he suffered from substance-induced psychotic disorder. Both say Gutting told them he heard voices. Next, one of Cooper's former neighbors took the stand. He said he saw Gutting walking casually away from Cooper's home after the stabbing. At the time, the neighbor told police it seemed like Gutting was in a trance and appeared to either be really high or having a psychotic episode. Finally, defense attorneys questioned the lead investigator for the case. The retired SPD detective testified that Gutting smelled of alcohol and told police he was drunk. A blood test taken hours after the crime showed that his blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit. The trial will resume tomorrow morning. When it's over, a judge will determine whether Gutting is guilty or not.